remembering and realizing the parent's the boss. We're not the boss. So we are ready to sit and listen. If we're washing hands every 10 minutes, we're washing hands. If we're wearing a mask, we're wearing a mask. We're taking the test, we're taking the test. If we're waiting in the waiting room while they spend time together for the beginning of each visit, then we're waiting in the waiting room. So we're not the boss. You tell us what to do, and we are willing to do it.
This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Kathryn Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. So whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Kathryn Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Howdy, y'all, and welcome to Season 8. The podcast officially kicks off with our 8th season. 8. I can't believe that today. And it's one of the people that I've probably, aside from my husband, she is one of the people that I have known longest when we're talking about people that I've had on the podcast. And we met her through a really providential way. So 21 years ago, I'm going to go ahead and date myself. Okay, so because I'm only 25, that's weird. Yeah, so 21 years ago, we moved to Austin. And our oldest, we only had one at the time, was just a toddler. And he got really sick and had to be hospitalized. And we had just moved to Austin. We'd been here like 10 days, I think. And I was obviously very anxious. It was our very first kid, and it was our very first hospital stay ever. So I was borderline freaking out. And there was a part in the stay, and it got a little dicey, and I was worried because I remember looking at the attending doctor and saying, like, we have no pediatrician. Like, what am I going to do? And he said, actually, there's a pediatrician that just left the hospital. She was an attending, and she just went into private practice, and I think she lives where y'all are going to be. So I think you should give her a call. And that's who you get to meet today. She has been our pediatrician for more than 2 decades, and I have tremendous respect for her as a physician, but I have even more respect for her as a human being, because on some of our hardest days in the hospital, when she should have, when she was probably seeing patients and doing all the things that a pediatrician does, she showed up at the hospital for us. And providentially, she and I were actually supposed to record this podcast months ago because we had planned to talk about pediatrics and how do you develop a good relationship with your pediatrician, particularly when your child has a lot of medical needs. And I was like, I can't think of a better person than Dr. Enders. And then she texted me and she said, hey, Kathryn, we're going to have to postpone because my daughter just went into early labor and the baby's in the NICU. Y'all. I said, absolutely. Forget I even emailed you, and I'll connect with you in a few months. And when I did reconnect with her, I was like, how about we talk about what it's like to be the grandparent of a NICU baby? And thus, this episode was born. So you are really going to love my guest. Maybe not as much as me, because no one can love her more than I do, but she is a treasure trove of information, and I know that our conversation will bless you. My guest today is Dr. Judith Enders. She's a pediatrician who's been practicing for over 2 decades. She completed her residency at Texas Children's Hospital in Houston and earned her medical degree from Michigan State University. She's a graduate of Prairie View A&M, where she majored in biology and minored in Spanish. Dr. Enders is active in her community with her church, and she's been married for more than 30 years and has 3 adult children, 2 daughters in medicine and a son in film, 2 sons-in-law, and a very lovable grandson. Dr. Enders has received numerous awards, including Best Doctors in Austin Monthly, Best Doctors in America, and Top 10 Central Texas Black Doctors. You're going to love her, so don't go anywhere, because let's have an amazing conversation. Well, I get to have one of my favorite people in the world. The one I was saying in the intro, aside from my husband, Dr. Enders, I think that I've known you the longest of all the guests that I've interviewed. That's how much I love you. So thanks
Well,
for
I
being
love
here.
you too. I love you dearly and your beautiful family. So thank you for having me as a guest.
Well, we have a lot to talk about, but I always like to give people a sense of who they're hearing from. So give us an idea. I know you majored in biology, which, by the way, I didn't know that you graduated from Prairie View. That's awesome. Why did you choose to go into medicine and why specifically pediatrics?
Well, I look forward to you stopping me because I am long winded. When you're in the office, I'm usually listening to you, but it turns out that I can talk too. So I am second generation going to Prairie View A&M University, a historically Black college. And my dad, who was an OB-GYN, also went to Prairie View. My parents met there. And so when I was there was a big just energy to kind of say, if you're interested in medicine, go for the top. And, everything in between, there's really no top, but go for the thing that you want to work and strive the hardest to do. So I had met a pediatric psychologist in elementary school, and I kept saying I was going to be a pediatric psychologist. And when I went to college, the head of the biology department said, well, I think you should just be a doctor, and you can decide, just go to med school, and then you can really decide if you want to do psychiatry or just different things. And my parents had been saying that, and I finally said, okay. And so pediatrics really came about more when I was finishing medical school and realized that I connected well with families, connected well with parents, want to be part of the village and part of the building blocks, from 0 to 18. When people say we're pediatricians, usually people go, "Aw," and I'm like 0 to 18. Not always aw. So that's the story.
There are very few doctors in our life, Dr. Enders, that we get to have for long periods of time, like that get to see our families grow up. So as much as I love that my kids get the chance to have you as their physician, I also, as the mom, get the chance to spend some time with you. And I can confirm and affirm that you are really good at what you do. So
Thank
I know originally we were going to talk about like the topic originally was, hey, how do you develop a good relationship with your pediatrician, especially when you have a medically fragile child? And then I get this email from you, and you were like, we need to reschedule because I have a grandbaby in the NICU. And it got me thinking, well, maybe that's what we were meant to talk about all along because I have parents all the time reach out, but I'm often having grandparents say, hey, my daughter, my son, my family just had a baby, and now I'm the grandparent in the NICU, and I don't know what to do. So, you had a little bit of a change in the family, so tell us about getting that news and what was kinda going through your mind when you got that phone call.
So I where do I start?
I
I
understand.
we thought we were having a grandchild March 4th of 2024. And I tell people instead, and so I say instead of March 4th, on 1/2, we got 3, and his name is Wayne 3. So he's the third. So I
I
call
love
him
that.
Wayne 3. And my daughter, who is the best OB-GYN in LA or outside of LA, unfortunately had some medical complications. And so ended up having him at 31 weeks, knowing that 40 weeks is term. So he was 2 months early and a little petite pumpkin bundle of joy. And we'd already labeled him a fighter during, some other complications she had had. And so we knew he was a fighter. So we had no doubt that things were going to go well. And they did. And so the outcome was great. But, it's we never planned to be in the NICU.
Right. Yeah, no one puts that on their list of their bucket list. Please let us
Absolutely.
have a stop in the NICU. Okay, so I have to ask, which hat did you wear more often? Grandma or pediatrician?
Well, and I clarify, I have a grandson, but I am not a grandma.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, what's your name? It's adorable, by the way. You gotta tell people what the name is.
Yes. So my initials are JME. So I'm Jammie. And so I love being a Jammie. And I feel like I used really the hat the most was the Jammie hat and the mom hat. I'm thankful for the group at the hospital, the NICU group that was, just kind and respectful, even, physician to physician, that they were, willing, of course, with my daughter's okay. And she was willing. She's like, Tom, you talk to them. She's the OB-GYN. I'm the pediatrician. So we could talk and interact. But once all of that was done, once we did the daily rounds and the daily discussion and we're gaining weight, and we're doing that, then things could settle and we could just be family. And the NICU is, it's a lonely place, which I learned. So as a doctor, you don't think of it as, you think of it as, no, I don't want to be there. I feel, you know, heartbroken or heart wrenched for my patients. It's the parent, you're concerned about the parent, you're concerned about the child, the baby, but you don't realize how lonely it is. And so knowing that my daughter would go there, she and her husband would go at times. He was still having to work at times. And so she would be there by herself, and not by herself, but her son is there. But then you're, and I hate to say just sitting, but you're sitting and, it may be that you're thinking about, your mind might go several different places, like, what's happening, or so you have to be distracted a little bit. And so I think we enjoyed being there, being the distraction, and just seeing and being thankful. And again, every medical situation, we have to be thankful for where we are. We have to be prayerful that where other people are. There are people who aren't going to get out as soon as he is, even though he stayed for 38 days. There are people who are going to have more complications. There's always something could be worse. So we remained thankful.
I hadn't even thought about this pediatrician aspect from your perspective. Your daughter being an OB-GYN, like, when does that ever, like, y'all knew all the things, both for your daughter as well as for the baby. I mean, knowledge is power. And so sometimes, when things weren't happening, you're like, okay, I can check that worry off my list and now we can move to the next thing. But I'd never thought about the fact that y'all had both of those perspectives and the fact that you're a mom and a daughter. So I love that. I'm grateful to hear that he is out of the NICU and now you get to be a full-time Jammie. I love that name, by the way. When you told me that, I was like, it's adorable. Clarify. So you live in Texas, they're in California. How did you manage the out of state support, but also the distance? Because, like, when we had our NICU baby, my mom and dad were just down the road. So I'm sure that provided some extra challenges.
Definitely. Back up a little bit to say we were thankful to go for Christmas, Christmas of 2023 to LA to see our daughter and her husband, and she's pregnant and just enjoying that. But she did have preeclampsia, and so we were about to leave. We were about to come home. Christmas has happened. Things were great. She was going back to work, and then she was at work and had to go straight to the hospital. So it was the day before we were leaving, and so we were thankful to be there. And the things that do go through your mind. I mean, she knows as the OB-GYN, unfortunately, there has been an increase in, Black female maternal mortality. And even a doctor from her medical school in Indiana, at Indiana University, Sharice Wallace, I believe, died right after having a baby.
Yes,
And there's
that.
the Kansas City Chiefs cheerleader who Crystal Anderson, she died after giving birth. And so those things go through your, our daughter was going to work. She went to the hospital. We go meet at the hospital and things stabilized. Thank God. So we went home. We came home. New Year's came and things seemed to be stabilized again. New Year's Eve. Then January 1st is New Year's Day. He was born January 2nd. And I was working the weekend of New Year's. And I came home and I said to my husband, and we just left. We had just left. And I said to my husband, we need to go. We're going to use and really God told me, get a flight. And I said, we're going this weekend. And I said, let's use our miles. And so January 6th, we made flights for January 6th. On January 1st, when I was on call, we made reservations for January 6th, not knowing he was going to be born January 2nd. So listening to God, listening to that feeling, listening to your heart, listening because things were stable. And my husband, thankfully, my husband of almost 33 years said, okay, if you say we got to go. Now, mind you, the weekend after that, we were already planning for a baby shower that became the postpartum party. So so they had another name, but my name for it, I think, was the postpartum party. And so we ended up being within 4 weeks, we were in LA 3 weeks out of 4 weeks. And being there to support was amazing. So the benefit of, the airlines and miles and all of those things really just became a reality that even though we're not right down the road, we are right down the road from an airport, and they were worth it. The opportunity just to see him was worth it. And so every month we've seen him.
Wow. So maybe if there's a grandparent listening and they want to support their grandbaby, and maybe the hospital isn't right down the road, but the airport is. What are some things that you found to be helpful from a grandparent perspective, that you felt you were loving your daughter and your son-in-law and your grandbaby well? And then what do you think your daughter appreciated y'all doing? I'm curious what some of those things were that you're like, these things were good, and I'm really glad that we did them.
Absolutely. Again, being in the room. So, and asking what we could and couldn't do.
Well, that's good.
Remembering and realizing the parent's the boss. We're not the boss. So we are ready to sit and listen. If we're washing hands every 10 minutes, we're washing hands. If we're wearing a mask, we're wearing a mask. We're taking the test, we're taking the test. If we're waiting in the waiting room while they spend time together for the beginning of each visit, then we're waiting in the waiting room. So we're not the boss. You tell us what to do and we are willing to do it. And that was joyful. I mean, we just wanted to be there. And so happy to wait in the waiting room, knowing, that care was happening. I think we did things at home. Sometimes it was parents wanted to go see him. We were going to see him for sure, but cleaning up, wiping windows, doing, dusting, folding clothes, cleaning bottles that were home, anything that we could do, and just being at the ready to do it. I mean, I definitely giving not too many toys. I got shower things and postpartum party things, but I, of course, being distant, I had made beforehand, right? Soon after I found out that they were going to be having a baby, I got this quilt made that had our pictures on it. So my husband and I our faces are on this quilt. It's a throw. And so you can't forget us because you just put it on him and you see him. And so and I made one for each of my children. When the other two have children, they'll have one too. So that connection, taking a book to read to him, planning to read to him, just knowing that sometimes there's a time and a place for things to be said. And we were happy to, just be quiet and just listen, talk when it was okay, not talk when we weren't, when it wasn't necessary. And what I will say for us, thankfully, technology is amazing. Now, our daughter gave us the password to be able to see him in the NICU. So they have.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So they must have had a video in the NICU. That's new. Yes.
Yeah. So for 24 hours at work, I could look in on him. At home, I could look in on him. And that helped with the distance. And the other thing, I mean, one of the good things about the distance, and I'm going to give away a secret, and hopefully they won't remember this part of it, but you you almost can't be told no when you have to make a plane reservation. In other words, if we're like, okay, does this date work for you? Yes, it does. Hey, we're going to be there. So we get to see him as opposed to, when you live close, it's, oh, we'll see you next week. Or, there's a little, when there are more options, you may not get to see them when you want to, but we kind of got to see them when we wanted to because we already had plans.
Well, thank you for sharing. Those are some really good suggestions. I mean, it sounds like, I don't know your daughter, but it sounds like the two of you have good communication and good boundaries in place of what is helpful and what is not helpful. And as I'm listening to that, like maybe if someone's listening and thinking, man, I don't have that kind of relationship with my mom or my dad, I think it's perfectly okay for you to say, hey, here's a list of things that would be helpful for us. And here's a list of things that make it hard. And this is why. Because I think when you're just like when you said you didn't realize how lonely the NICU was, sometimes a parent may not know what their child is going through. And so it's sort of on the kids a little bit to say, hey, these things are really good. And then when you do them, it alleviates tons of stress. But when you do these things, that's really hard for us. But if you did this, it would be so great. I think sometimes when people give us some direction, it helps because the NICU is already stressful. We don't need to make it more stressful. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app in the Apple Store or on Google Play, or you can visit our website to discover all the ways that we can support you as a NICU parent at handtohold.org. You can join one of our support groups, sign up for counseling, find loss and bereavement support, request a peer mentor, or check out our educational resources and family stories. And all of that is at no cost to you. I love the videos and the NICUs. I'm so glad that so many more NICUs have those because mine was just a 3 a.m. phone call to the night nurse. So I love that now there's a video because mine would have been like the Olympics. I would have had it live streamed all the time and I would have been stalking that thing like nobody's business. So
And I was.
good. So did you have a conversation with your daughter and your son-in-law about what would be helpful, or did you just already know that?
So some of it was knowing,
Okay.
just, that feeling of just, even the simple thing of, I see an empty water cup, I'm going to fill it. I see and there were gentle, when we were at home, just the gentle reminders of eat. Or if I saw her doing a lot, I would like say, would you sit down, please? And, I want her to sit down and I'm here and I wanted to be ahead of the game and give it to her ahead of time. There was, she gave us a few statements. I don't think we knew his name the first day he was born or his size initially because of her medical fragileness at the time. She couldn't see him she saw him, but she couldn't go to him. So she saw him once he was delivered and then he was in the NICU and she had to heal. So they said that we would be introduced to him virtually before we'd made it there that next week. And we'd be introduced at a certain time, be ready, the next after 24 hours or 36 hours or whatever that was. And we didn't have the right to say, no, we want to do it now. We just had the right to listen. And we, again, that was their request and that's what we abided with. There was a time in the NICU, I don't remember how it actually came up, but my daughter said, in the NICU, I will be holding him outside, other people can hold him. And so that was her, he was in the incubator a lot. He was, and so there was minimal touch time. So she wanted those touch times to be with she and her husband. And so her putting that, and I think parents just saying, this is the time when they get the opportunity to say, this is what we want. And honestly, grandparents really, there's nothing you can say back to that. If they give that guidance, it should be followed. And so, I snuck in a little hold, but
as any good grandparent does. I'm curious, did you love them in a different way than your husband were like? What did that look like when it came to how you served and loved them? And was it different with your husband? Grandpas tend to do things differently. I'm curious.
absolutely. And he is Omi for Old Man Enders. Omi. So Jammie and Omi.
Okay. I'm loving I'm writing these down because they're so
That's right.
adorable. And someday that's going to be us. Okay.
There you go. So he, so I think part of whatever a person's profession is gets them comfortable in that profession. You have a level as whatever your profession is of kind of, you know where you are when you are in that zone, and then you step out of that zone. So in the zone of being a pediatrician and her being an OB-GYN, there are times when we're talking shop, we're talking professional.
Right.
And my husband, being a very smart, wonderful engineer, has a way of thinking as well, but it's not medical. And so he could be more emotional, I think a little bit more emotional at times, just because this is his first daughter, his first born baby girl, had a C-section. She had surgery. She's never had surgery in her life. She had medical issues, never had medical issues in her life. So his viewpoint was definitely very fatherly and loving and clearly supportive, and a little bit of my husband and I are in awe of all of our children. And you could see the awe of him seeing his baby girl healing from a surgery, breastfeeding or pumping, loving on her first baby. And so that tenderness, I could see his tenderness. And I definitely had similar emotional feelings, but I had to first put my head on, put the doctor head on, manage that, and then move it over. And I will say, I think I took the doctor hat off, clearly took it off when he was out of the hospital. 38 days later was when I could find more of just Jammie. And that whole time, my husband, I feel like Omi had the opportunity to just see it from that standpoint of the unconditional love we all have for our children, and then that extra added unconditional love for our grandson.
I didn't think you were going to make me cry, but that made me tear up a little bit and so tender. I didn't even think about firstborn, first grandbaby. Like what a tender place for a dad, especially with his daughter. Oh, okay. I got to go to the next question because I don't want to keep crying. Okay, so good questions that you think a grandparent can ask of their child to make the stay maybe less traumatic or a little bit easier for their children.
Maybe specifics of, may I make you lunch, breakfast, or dinner? Those specifics. And you have to know your child. They have to know their child. So some people are, don't touch my dirty clothes, my clean clothes, don't fold anything for me. But if you can, cutting the grass, any of those things, and clearly there's another child at home, then just being able to say, we've got your other one, or we are your other ones, and we will be making dinner, we will be keeping it home, we will be, doing whatever they need. And so I feel like asking, listening, and offering specifics. We're going to get you fruit. We saw you had no fruit at home. We're going to just get some fruit. And less of just less of the extras. I mean, if they want flowers, great, flowers. But a girlfriend, a dear friend of mine, who's also a pediatrician, got Wayne 3 a teddy bear that you can tape a message to. And so she got it for me to tape a message to him. And that was one of the items that was at the hospital. And so just to be able to tape that message to him of love and a prayer to him, that was just very, very special. So friends giving things. And I know people have seen these cards that are for preemies that talk about different things. I've accomplished this today. I'm no more tubes, no more this, no more that. And if grandparents don't know about that, I know they can find them on the web. I think there's sweetpea.org or something does it. There are a
Yeah,
few other places.
we'll link those in the show notes. That's good.
Yeah. So some other things that they can just bring, and journaling and picture taking is important. As much as the hope is, it's like if you broke your leg, take a picture of the cast. You never want to be in this again, but this is part of their life. And so
Yes.
taking pictures, journaling, because we're all going to forget things. So even having that moment, those journals of, he slept a little longer, he did this, or he opened his eyes, or any of the little things that the grandparent can actually journal about, to be able to tell that baby a year from now or 5 years from now or 18 years from now. I think that's really special too.
That's great advice about the photos because sometimes your daughter or your son may be solo focused on baby and making it from this hour to the next hour. And as much as we have some photos of some hard moments, and at the time, either the person that took or if it was me or my husband, I remember thinking, I hope this is okay. But now when I go back and look at those, I think I'm so grateful that we can see how far we've come. Like, I'm really glad that I documented that hard thing because I needed to visually see it again so that I could see how far we've moved past that and been able to heal from that. What a good piece of advice. This is why I have you. So I love it. So you're my very first guest for the whole season. And so typically my last question of all my interviews is to say, like, what advice do you have? But this whole season is about giving people hope. So whether they're in chaos right now or they're facing a difficult illness down the road, I wanted to give them some hope of what might exist on the other side. So my question is, what hope would you give a grandparent who feels very helpless seeing their grandbaby in the NICU?
So, even God told us there is a beginning and an end. And we know that end ending is not always a bad thing. Things end. The hospital stay will end. So we have to think of it as, even though we're at the beginning and there may be a long journey, there is going to be an end to this
Good.
staying time. So I recently also heard someone say, remember, balance does not mean you're giving equally to every part of whatever that pie is. Balance just means that you know that you can't put all of your energy and your time into one thing. So the balance is, even though we're tired, frustrated, worried, scared, the other part of that is we can still laugh and joke and still, and so maintaining balance of, we're going to put our energy into this, but we're also going to, you know, come in a silly outfit or say something funny, or whatever that connection you feel like can be made, or take that picture, because the end of this hospital stay is going to be different than the beginning of this hospital stay. And
Yes.
hope is the word that, I mean, I think that just, that helps to light the path, knowing that there's hope. And I said we labeled Wayne 3 a fighter before he was born. And if you label the good news, there's always good news. So labeling as a grandparent, coming in and going, what? An ounce? Yes, we got up an ounce. We got up half an ounce. If you label the good news, there's going to be some bad news. But how about we as the grandparent bring in the good news? And that can maintain a parent, and they'll remember that. And so I feel like there's so many ways forward, knowing that there is a good path that's well lit, and balancing out the difficult time with knowing there is some good time too can make a difference.
I think label the good news just became my new screensaver. So when I come see you with the girls in a few weeks, I'm going to say, look, Dr. Enders, look at what I have on my phone. That's such good advice. Dr. Enders, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. You're an amazing person. Thank you for your kindness, your goodness, your wonderful family, and for this that you're doing for all the families that need it.
So say it with me. Label the good news. How great is that? I love that advice so much. In today's 2-minute take, that's my big takeaway. Label the good news, grandparents. So if there is something great happening with your NICU grandchild, label the good news. Write it down, blast it from the mountaintops, shout it loud, but label the good news. I thought that was such encouraging hope and advice at the end of our interview. There were many things that resonated with me, but I was glad to hear Dr. Enders say, if there's something that can help your child in the NICU, so you have this grandbaby in the NICU and there's something that you can do for your daughter or your son, asking, what is it that can I do? Can I fix you dinner? Can I do this? Like, this conversation that we can start to have with our kids about how can we serve you. Dr. Enders was saying, your kids are the boss. And so if you're a parent listening to this and you have a grandparent who wants to help, but maybe you're like, the conversation's hard to have, y'all just send them this podcast and say, I'm sending this to you because I love you. And I think it might help to hear from a grandparent of how they helped their own grandbaby that was in the NICU. And maybe you'll get some ideas. I think some of us have great relationships with our parents and some of us have difficult relationships. And so my hope is that this particular podcast episode will maybe help you see from a grandparent's eyes what it's like to have a grandbaby in the NICU, but also if you're the grandparent, how you can love your kids better by loving that baby and loving their family. And how can you do that? I thought Dr. Enders' advice, whether you're close to the NICU or whether you are an airplane ride away, that there was some really good nuggets in that interview. What you didn't get to hear was after we wrapped the recording and we caught up on life, and just also some encouragement to you parents who have a pediatrician. Get to know your pediatrician, because Dr. Enders has been one of our biggest advocates in medicine, certainly with our son specialist, but with me as the mom, she has affirmed and spoken some good truths to me when I needed to hear it. And I was listening to no one else, but I was listening to Dr. Enders. And that is the fruit of having spent many, many, many visits and hours in her office. And she loves what she does. So find a pediatrician, ask around, ask your friends and say, who is the pediatrician that's your ride or die, who is just fantastic, and take the time to interview them and seek them out and see if it's a good fit, because there's no one perfect pediatrician. There's just the perfect pediatrician for your family. So my hope is, grandparents, that this is the episode that you've been asking for, and I'm pretty sure that it delivered. So if you love the episode, please give us a rating, go over and watch us on YouTube, but don't go anywhere, because next time we're going to be chatting about this.
The beginning of school is started. You call the school and say, who is my child's tracking teacher? Who is my child's case manager? Get their name, get their email, and that's your first go-to. Email them, hey, I'm Susie's mom. Susie had a bad morning, or I need to look at the IEP again. That is your go-to person. That's so important for you to know that tracking teacher.